Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we wrap up our retrospective on Frankenstein in film with the 1969 film Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm host Jason Henderson, author of the Alex Van Helsing series from HarperCollins. With me from Austin is Tony Savaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth Studios, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. And by the way, it was a snippet of Deserts of Mars that you heard at the beginning of this show. Welcome, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also, Mr. Drew Edwards, editor-in-chief of HorrorMovies.net, writer for Rockabilly Online, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
Edwards must be destroyed. Just doesn't.
Edwards must be destroyed.
It doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well.
I have to say, this was a solid title, a truly solid title. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. All right. According to Wikipedia, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed is a British horror film directed by Terence Fisher, who's the director of the last one that we watched, for Hammer Film Productions from 1969.
He's done the last two movies we've watched.
So in a way, this was actually a Terence Fisher trilogy as much as anything else. A Terence Fisher retrospective, or half retrospective anyway. The cast includes Peter Cushing, Freddy Jones, Carlson, and Simon Ward. The film is the fifth in a series of Hammer films centering on Dr. Frankenstein, who in this entry tries brain surgery to save an associate who went mad. Okay. Bearing in mind that this is the end of our Frankenstein retrospective for now, we may well come back because there's a hell of a lot of Frankenstein out there. But bearing all that in mind, and bearing in mind that this is also the three Hammers that we've been through, let's go Drew, Joya, Tony, and then I'll go. Opening thoughts, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed.
This is actually the first Hammer Frankenstein that I saw when I was a kid. Hammer movies were a lot harder to get a hold of than Universal movies, so when you could find one, you always kind of counted the video store gods were good to you that day. So this kind of shaped my impression of what the Hammer Frankenstein movies are like, which is interesting in a way because this is by far the darkest movie, I think, in the Hammer Frankenstein films, but it's still a really interesting film. It's got a lot of interesting behind-the-scenes stuff with it. Cushing is by far his most evil and most sinister in this movie, and I think he's great in it. I think my only issue with it is when I viewed it as an adult, when I was a kid, it felt like it was this epic, and that there was all these different parts of it that just felt like it went on forever. And then when I watch it as an adult, I realize how short this movie is, and I kind of wish certain parts of it were a little longer so they could flesh certain things out, which we'll get more into when we discuss the movie at length. But I do really like this film. I'm glad that we've come around to discussing it. Not my favorite Hammer Frankenstein. My favorite one is Frankenstein Created Woman, but this is still a really good one to cap off our Frankenstein discussion for now.
Yeah, excellent. Joya, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed.
I actually didn't like this film, and I think it's probably the fact that the rape scene really just ruined it for me, but I can't think of very many things I liked about it, honestly, that I didn't already. I mean, obviously Peter Cushing is awesome, and Veronica Carlson is great, but I just didn't care for it. I thought it was very dark, and especially the rape scene was completely unnecessary and ridiculous, and afterwards finding out why it was even in there made me even more angry. So we can talk about that more later. But
the director, for what it's worth, the director and the cast all agree with you.
Yeah, well, I know, and Peter Cushing especially, he apologized to Veronica Carlson for it and said it was horrible. Anyway, so that really just, I think I'm finding it hard to separate the film from that scene. I'm finding it hard to go, aside from that, did I like it, and I think it's okay, but I don't think I think it's definitely my least favorite of the ones we've watched.
I don't know. I'm firmly in the middle. Didn't dislike it, but when you, I know you guys keep saying dark, but to me, I guess maybe it's darker, but it's still not really a Frankenstein. It's a Frankenstein movie about Dr. Frankenstein. It's not a Frankenstein movie about Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know. I kind of like those movies a bit better. Plus, I think again the kind of darkness thing. I guess there's more blood. There's
Well,
dark
no, I
stuff
mean they deal
happening. But I mean,
with
mostly he's
people
just a
stuff.
criminal more than he's like a monster making genius.
Yeah.
Like he's a murderer, and mostly he's a blackmailer too, which is like, whoa, man, just really
Well, that
showing that genius. I don't know. It like a lot like there's some really cool stuff, and I think it's in the same. I'm having rewatched Hammer Frankenstein. I mean, Cushing is awesome all the time. Like
Yeah.
hands down, I'll watch anything Peter Cushing. It's great. But as far as these movies go, oh, give me Hammer Vampires all the way because this is. I'm kind of. I don't know. There's a lot of just kind of boredom and just like, well, that's weird. Okay, I guess we're doing that. But
Right.
I mean, the monster looks like your uncle who shows up drunk at the family reunion. He's not like there's a monstrous thing at one point, and there's monstrous things that happen. Maybe that's the point. Is the monsters are people, but give me Universal over this. To be honest with you,
It is a very strange series when you get down to it. Think about the fact that this series, at this point, Hammer has said basically to the audience and to one another, we no longer are thinking about the Universal Monster series at all. It's completely out of everybody's mind. We're doing our own thing. And we're no longer thinking about Mary Shelley. We're way off in our own Hammer universe. And we're doing a series of movies that may or may not involve actual monsters, but definitely involve a lot of strange sort of negative daring do by this traveling chemist, surgeon, sociopath who moves from place to place and lies and cheats and steals and blackmails and apparently commits sexual assault, in order to further his own ends, just sort of all
well,
the
that's
time.
and they keep
when,
talking. There's all this stuff about, oh man, he's got this master plan. There's going to be all these Frankenstein monsters and stuff, but he keeps reviving these like kind of pitiable people, and that's about it. Like, I mean, he's willing to chop heads off and kick bodies around and bury random people. There's like shocking things, but like every time when you have something like Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, you expect his plot to be not like you expect like, oh man, well there's just going to be bodies. He's about to really make this thing he's been planning all this time.
Right.
And really he's like, yeah, there's a guy in an asylum, so let's bust him out, take his brain, put that in something. That's cool,
Yeah,
right? Like, oh, master plan. Let's go. Like,
Right. Well, that's Tony. That's part of what
like,
I'm talking about when I say dark, though. I mean, asylum. I think for some reason, I'm really upset about the idea of asylums and how, the idea that people, we don't, these people are crazy. They don't belong in society. So let's put them in solitary confinement and abuse them and treat them horribly, and then they'll be better. No, obviously the intention is not to make them better, just to torture them. I mean, it's very cruel. So
no,
that whole
part,
thing, that's dark, that part, and then
there's also the fact that like the guy is stealing drugs to sell them, and then you
Sure.
you mentioned the blackmailing and the way he just sort of takes over these two kids' lives.
Yeah.
Like
I understand, but that's
it's
like
not like mad science evil. It's just straight up like
when
freaking
you can watch
evil.
all of that, not in a Frankenstein movie.
But I'm saying when Julia and I are saying dark, like that stuff's dark.
I can watch a true crime movie, and you can even watch a crime movie that involves asylums. I mean, you're correct in that all of that is dark, but in a movie again called Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, I kind of wanted more Frankenstein is at the top of his game kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know. It doesn't really gel. Like, I'm not going to go out of my way to watch it again, I guess. I don't know.
Well, what's sort of frustrating here, you're totally right. I mean, what's frustrating is we start in Curse of Frankenstein, and Frankenstein is a genius, and he tries to make his creature, and a few things go wrong, and we think, next time he's going to get it right. And Revenge, he gets some of it right, and he gets it right in order to effect his own escape. But basically, when we watched this movie, which came out in 1969, this movie, we skipped two, okay? We skipped two entire Peter Cushing Frankenstein movies, and basically in this film, he's still exactly where he always is.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Always
Like,
on.
I forgot we skipped two. He's still trying to get his plot is like, oh man. And I know it's part of the plot. You could do the break him out of the asylum, get what you want, further the plot in like a lot shorter time. Frankenstein the genius is like,
Yeah.
now's the time. You want that kind of destroy all monsters kind of thing. If it's the final, like in a series, you kind of hope
Oh,
the
but it's
stakes
not.
are up, but the stakes are not. Like, he's still blackmailing people as his
Yeah.
like that's what he does the most. Other than he does some murders, but mostly he's like, haha, do what I say, because I'll tell people about drugs.
Can I
Oh,
can
I'm
I
a
just point
genius.
out, you're exactly right, Tony. I mean, for instance, okay, I know I talk about this book all the time, but in Nightwalkers, which was one of the first books I read about Hammer movies, they go over each one of these, and they go over the next one with Cushing, because in a sense, this is the You Only Live Twice of the Cushing Frankensteins, because it's the last one he's in, because in the next one they recast him and they start over, and then that sucks, and so then they have the Diamonds Are Forever of Frankensteins because Cushing comes back for one more. And Bruce Wright in Nightwalkers talks about how basically by the time, if you think of each of these as an episode, by the time you get to the next one, which is Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, it's sort of revealed in a sense that whatever genius he had is just sort of been wasted in just a lot of business on the part of Frankenstein, and that ultimately uh, he's left to kind of a meaningless existence, constantly retreading the same ground over and over again. It's very weird. I mean, it's totally.
In fairness,
Yeah.
though, he's not the creature he creates in this film. He's not doing it
Yeah.
because he's trying to prove that he can. He knows he can. He's doing it because
Yeah. Let's
he needs
recap
this
it really
guy.
quickly.
He needs this guy alive so he can get this guy who was another mad scientist with a similar field of study. He wants to know something of his own methods that he can only get straight from him. But since the guy is babbling mad, he needs
Yeah.
to cure the pressure on his brain, which
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
is convoluted.
what's
It's
cool-
convoluted. It's convoluted. I agree with Tony with that. But
I don't think it's that. Well, Tony's point isn't that it's too convoluted, although it is a little bit. It's pretty easy to.
It does take away from, by having him have to go through the motions of creating another Frankenstein's monster when we know he can do this, from going out, because this is the fifth film in the series. I'm getting what Tony's saying. It's like you'd like to see him do crazier stuff.
Now, okay, so there's a couple things. When you describe it like that, I kind of wish that when you describe it like that, it's like a body horror heist film, which that is cool. And I will also totally cop that I'm doing something that I usually despise, which is to say, I wish this movie was this movie that's in my head, and that's not really fair. So I was totally cop to that's not fair to say, like, why is this movie the movie that I have in my head? So I'm gonna.
Well, I think the
totally
movie
lay
you
it
want to
out.
see. I think the movie you want to see is Frankenstein Created Woman.
If I may, I think what Tony's getting at, Tony, tell me if I'm wrong. you're saying with a title like Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, that promises a kind of an epic feel. Like we're going to see Frankenstein somehow standing on the horizon with an army of creatures behind him, and the good people of the Hammerverse deciding that they need to destroy Frankenstein once and
Or
for
even if
all.
he doesn't have those, we know that like
Yeah,
that's a very real thing. Like if we don't do this, really bad things are going to happen.
right. And
And
instead, none of that. It's all of these movies are really almost comedies of manners involving weird science, but they're still always very small. The sets are fairly small. There's not even the grandeur of the vampire films. I'm not bitching about Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed per se. I'm just saying that these are all small and claustrophobic movies, which is weird. And in this one, he's the lodger. I mean, he's basically in a, he's literally in a drawing room. He's in
plus,
this
Right.
yeah.
Well, and eventually he does end up in the castle, and then you were like, oh, okay,
yeah,
now we're
but even that's
finally in the
like, oh
castle.
no, the cops are here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
I should
but
I should
what's cool
mention,
though, I
let's
mean,
let's kind of go through some of the things in it.
well, it
The
opens
main
with the
plot of
head
the
getting chopped off, and that's like, see that
yeah,
again, that sets the pace. This is a
It
Frankenstein
opens
who's
with
willing to
what?
go
Do
out
it
in
again?
broad daylight
yeah,
What'd you say, Tony?
and
It opens with what?
head being chopped off.
Oh,
yes,
when we see the door of the doctor, and then there's the blood.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah, yeah.
begins with
yes,
a
Right.
dude walking down the street, and Frankenstein is straight up murders a guy in daylight,
yeah,
takes his head, and that
Yeah.
sets it up. Where you're like, oh man. So when it
yeah,
gets to just, I wouldn't say blackmail's like petty crime, but like compared to I walk around and cut a guy's head off,
yeah.
the stakes are not as high. Let's put it that way.
Well, and I
Well,
don't even
it's that
understand why. Like, I don't know. There's just like I say, there's so many things in this film where it didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense that he needed to have Doctor the other doctor be a doctor, like the body that he's going to use
okay. Well,
for.
let's get to that in a sec, because I feel like
Yeah.
we've sort of glossed over. I should do like a 20-second recap just from the top, because
Okay.
I feel like we've glossed over a whole bunch,
Yeah.
and I don't want to. I don't want to get too confusing. Here it is in a nutshell. The heist that Drew and Tony are referring to, for the viewer who has, or listener who hasn't viewed this in a while,
Forever.
basically Frankenstein needs secrets about how to freeze brains as part of his super science. Another scientist that he was working with had cracked the code on how to freeze brains properly and store them for future use. But the problem is that knowledge is now residing in the head of a surgeon who sits in an asylum babbling to himself because he's gone mad because of all the weird science they've been doing. Frankenstein needs to get that guy, and he breaks him out, and he's going to cure his madness. But the problem is the
And
guy
here's
has a
where I
bad
want to
heart.
interrupt you to say the rest of this is stupid and crazy, because
Okay,
he's
let
going
me
to cure
finish
him
the
of his
sentence.
madness. No, he's going to cure him of his madness by taking his brain out of his body and putting it in another body. Why? Why is that? Why
No,
does that need to
no,
happen?
that's Julia. No, you've missed it. That was not how he was going to cure his madness. He's going to cure the guy's madness, but the problem is the guy's going to die of heart failure. And so because he's going to
Oh,
die of
okay.
heart failure, they need to put him into a fresh body and then cure his madness.
Yeah, well,
So
that was stupid.
so now we've got another problem, which is we need to get the guy a body. And that's the whole movie. This is the episode of the series where it's all about go get some
Yeah, but
secret
that's,
knowledge out of this guy.
and
Yeah.
again, it's a completely ridiculous plot, because the idea that he can fix the guy's brain, he can do a brain transplant, but he can't fix his heart. I mean, I get that he's not. We were joking that he's like, damn it, Jim, I'm a brain surgeon, not a heart surgeon. It's like,
Yes.
why can't he get a heart surgeon in to help him and manipulate, blackmail that guy and fix his heart rather than changing his body? I just thought that was the dumbest reason for a brain transplant ever.
What you're again missing is mad scientist. At the point where he's like, well, I could replace his heart. That would solve that. But then I still have to solve the brain part. So let's just do some more brain parts, because that's really what I do.
right?
I mean, heart, schmart, whatever. But putting this thing in this other thing, that's really, now I've got an excuse to do that.
Yeah,
What I
and
would
then
love-
and
what I
then the
love-
body he chooses, he decides he has to choose the body of a doctor. Why? Why does it have to be the body of a doctor if he's going to not use the
hilariously,
brain?
he's looking out across all of London town, and he says,
Yeah.
whose body is most perfect for me to move this brilliant brain into?
And
Why
he doesn't
I
pick
think
somebody
that,
who's not going to be missed or noticed.
Well,
He picks
I'm
like a
just
super
saying
reputable
that
doctor.
that epitome of manliness, Freddy Jones, is nobody's idea of the ideal creature into which to plop a perfect brain.
At the same
you know,
time, I feel like the he is one of the biggest assets to this film because
Freddy Jones is brilliant. He is
so great, and like I always forget that he's barely in the movie because like the scenes with him and his wife are so heartbreaking.
He could have just been. It could have just been always been Dr. Brand. Like I don't understand. It should have been it just irritates me because
But the thing
he should have
is,
just been the doctor all along, and he should have fixed his brain and tried to get him to help with whatever monster that he was trying to create for whatever reason, and not have him be the monster. Like he shouldn't have been involved with that.
But then you'd lose some of the best parts of the
exactly. If you got rid of the Freddy Jones stuff, because Freddy Jones plays two parts in this. He plays originally the doctor he is, and then he plays his body with the other brain in it, and you get this. That's the most interesting business in the movie. It really is.
That's all you need is Freddy Jones. You don't need the first guy.
No, but the whole point is Freddy Jones experiencing having a different brain inside of him, or rather being a brain that wakes up in Freddy Jones's body.
Yeah, like the whole scene where he like looks at his hands and he realizes that he's got different hands.
He's got different hands.
Genius.
It is. It's wonderful.
I'm saying you could have done all that if he had been a madman and then not a madman. You could have still had him because he could have had he could have done something horrible to himself.
I don't think he would have had the same. I don't think it would have had the same effect. Plus, I feel like after several Frankenstein films that Hammer did, this is the only one. I will say this is the only one that gets the relationship between Frankenstein and his creation right. Because the thing that makes the Universal movies superior, sorry, Jason, the thing that makes the Universal Frankenstein films superior is they always got that sort of symbiotic relationship between the mad scientist and the monster very, very, just down pat. Like this movie, to me, out of all of the as interesting as the Hammer Frankensteins are, this is the only one that comes close to matching that because, this character that Freddy Jones plays is so interesting to me. Like that's the thing. Like when I was a kid, I thought that there was so much more of him, and then when I came back and saw this movie as an adult, when I bought it, I was actually disappointed that he's really only in like 10 minutes, maybe less.
Well, I mean, he's an extremely memorable actor. I just got to mention really quickly, Freddy Jones is one of my favorite performers, and that's only based on like 3 movies that I've seen him in. And the thing of it is about this guy, in Firefox, for instance, Firefox is a 1982 thriller starring Clint Eastwood. Freddy Jones plays the boss that sends Clint Eastwood on his mission. He's in like 8 minutes of screen, and yet he runs away with the film. He's interesting. His readings are really compelling, and they haunt you for the rest of the film. There's something about this actor who is just able. He talks like no human ever talked. There's nothing realistic about Freddy Jones, but there's something about him that is always compelling to watch. Likewise, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He's brilliant. All the stuff, all the monster stuff with him. Any of the complaints I have nothing to do. When he's on screen, realizing what he is and kind of what's happened, and his interaction with his wife.
He knows, like he's a colleague of Frankenstein's. Especially since he knows, like the fact that he's a colleague of Frankenstein makes those scenes even better.
Yeah. Like I kind of wish, you know, if Frankenstein's truly evil, he would put him in a body that could talk enough and do what he needs to do, but also totally monsterify him. Like,
Yeah.
So you just wish he was more
like
hulky and
maybe
uglier.
not give him a body at all. Just have him be a like that. What's that movie with where it's just a head, that woman's head?
The brain that would not die.
The brain that would
Yeah,
not
the
die.
brain that would not die. It could have just been that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And he could have questioned the brain. You're right. That is a way that this totally and completely
But
could
the
have
whole
gone.
thing is he doesn't know how to preserve a brain.
Right. Well, in the
knows
case
how
of
to
the brain that wouldn't
transport
die,
yeah,
It was a head. Yeah, but
Yeah.
I
Let's
They could have
talk
made it
for-
a head and a torso, like in Boxing Helena. God.
Yeah, right.
God.
The other,
I think
boy, that's a reach.
I think that this is, a lot closer to Shelley's monster than any of the other films too, because he
That's
is
a
so
fine
articulate.
point. No, that's
He's
true.
so articulate.
Yes.
I just love this character, and yeah, I guess he could have be more. He's just basically got some funky scars on his head. He could be more monstrous. I get you that. Although, like if they'd gone full on crazy like what they did with Christopher Lee, I feel like you would have lost a lot of what the actor brings with his face.
No, you're right.
They've made a real choice. This is what these movies are. Is they are basically very strange films about a serial killer who likes to who reanimates people. It has grandiose ideas.
The cop said it best. A insane medical adventurer.
Yes, and as these years are going on, we have to realize, and Frankenstein has to realize, that his likelihood of doing something that truly changes the world are lessening. It's just very strange.
I want to throw out something about this, because he keeps talking throughout these films about how he's going to show his findings. And when we did, Revenge of Frankenstein last week, I can't remember if it was Tony or Julia, but somebody brought up, like, what would he do to reveal his findings? Because he would have to confess to all these murders, and now rape. Is he willing to do, like, if he manages to prove all his theories, are we just with? And actually, he probably would. But I just want to know, like, do you think he would be willing to go up the river for science, effectively?
I think probably yes. But he would probably hurl himself off the Reichenbach Falls instead of actually going to prison. I want to mention that to shift focus for just a moment to the fact that in this movie also, besides all the stuff that we've been talking about, there's also a pretty decent Hitchcock ripoff. All right, because if you take away the fact that this is a Frankenstein movie, what you've really got is a movie like what was the one with Joseph Cotton where he's a killer who moves into the upstairs room of
You're talking about The Lodger.
Not The Lodger. The Lodger is a Hitchcock film. The plot going on here is very Hitchcockian. He knows these kids are up to kind of vaguely minor no good, but it's not that much. They're not that bad. But he's manipulating them. He moves into their house. He takes over their life. He puts the young doctor to work for him. He puts the wife to work for him, quote unquote, to make coffee. And there's all of these bits, and we're going to get to the sexual assault in a second, but there's all of these suspense bits that the movie builds in that are really engaging. Like the thing where there's several things involving hiding this body that they've killed in the middle of the suburbs, because there's one where the cops are coming around and everybody is involved in hiding this body. And there's another when they've hidden the body properly, but then a water main breaks and they have to hide it again.
Oh man, that's a great scene, by the way.
It's great.
Terrifying. Like her reaction and the fact
that was terrifying. It reminded me of Poltergeist when the swimming pool floods and all the bodies come up. That arm just comes out from under the ground. It's flopping around. It's so creepy.
Really
I love the whole business of the doctors or the guy they bust out of the insane asylum's wife comes in, and they're trying to deny that Frankenstein is staying with him, and he just straight up goes, "Oh yes, I'm Dr. Frankenstein. Here I've got your husband," and husband's all wrapped up in Frankenstein monster bandages, but he takes her down there and talks to him, and he builds up her confidence, like, "Oh well, he just needs a few weeks to recover, and then you can go off with him." She's all happy when she leaves, but he turns completely within a second, changes every expression on his face, and says, "We're leaving."
We're leaving. That's great.
I love that bit.
All that stuff is like straight out of like Hitchcock. I was thinking of A Shadow of a Doubt. All that stuff is like a Hitchcock movie or like an Ira Levin novel. I mean, it's all just about this killer. So this manipulator. That's all wonderful stuff. It's just very strange that this is, given the money that Hammer has, this is what they choose to do with their Frankenstein series.
Well, it's also like the Cushing Frankenstein seems kind of. I wonder if when they were doing the Hannibal Lecter movies, if they were thinking about this character, because there seems to be a commonality, and we just did a lot of those, and watching them so close together, I was like, man, there is this sort of similarity with this sort of like well-mannered but diabolical sociopath that they have here.
But even more than those, that's what's interesting, is those movies are much more recent. And yet each one of those, with a couple of exceptions, are about a protagonist who has to grapple with Hannibal Lecter. These Frankenstein movies have other characters in them, but he is the main character, he is the protagonist, and he's a villain. It's fascinating. I mean, when you think about it, that's pretty rare. I'm having a hard time thinking of other
All the
series
Dracula movies are that way.
Not really, not in the Hammer world. In the Hammer world, that's one of the main problems actually with the Hammer Draculas, is usually they're about some other characters who Dracula doesn't interact with enough. Yeah.
Well, I think the thing is about the I view the Dracula movies almost the same way I view like Freddy or Jason movies, is where you have this villain that pops up every few years.
That's right.
And
that's
people
exactly
have to people have to deal with it. Like Frankenstein really is. You're right. He is the main character of these films, and he's, to put it mildly, he's a son of a bitch. He's terrible.
Freddy Krueger is not the main character. Jason Voorhees isn't the main character of those movies. But yeah, Frankenstein is the main character here. It's of course he's a villain. He's totally. And I'm trying to think of another series. Ripley. Okay. The Ripley character that Matt Damon played, the talented Mr. Ripley. He's the main character and he's a villain. But that's one of the few that I can think of. That's interesting.
There's, I keep coming back to, so there's a few things I really love. So at the beginning, when we get to Frankenstein, he's on the run again. He has this weird mask for a little bit, and then when the cops get him, he's like, "Well, I'll just kick a body down a hole. Throw this. The jig is up. I'm gonna throw this head I just got down a hole." He's got he's got these things that lead to, I guess, to the sewer, where he's willing to he knows if he has to bug out, he can just chuck everything down the sewer, and that's awesome. Like that's some mad scientist stuff there. And then the girl. It's so interesting too, because when she has to deal, because she's really such a victim here, because her husband is getting blackmailed, and that's why she's along for the ride. But she's gonna stick with him, even through all this crazy crap. When she has to deal with digging up a body whose arm is flapping around when the water main breaks, digging up a body and hiding it, and then watching as Frankenstein comes out and is like, what's the deal? And it's all silent. Like they just look at each other. And she's basically like, yeah, dude, I just hid this body for you that I had to dig up in the garden. And hide from the cops and hope.
So at that point, she's really part of the team. I mean, to the extent that, so now is a good time.
Well, she's also so much more interesting I hate to say it, she's interesting in her suffering. She's a lot more interesting than a lot of the other Hammer ingenues, which were
I'm with you.
mostly just there because they filled out a corset nicely. But you know, she's this young lady is doing a lot of like facial acting. She's, you know, like you really feel for her. In you know, I think I kind of agree with Julia that I wish that the rape scene was not there, because I feel like that you.
Well, it doesn't happen. I mean, basically,
It doesn't.
happen.
There's no other reference to it throughout the movie, and like all this stuff you can get simply just because like of all the other stuff she's had to go through. Like I feel like there's no other reason for her character to have that arc.
So they added in, because apparently Jason said, and the IMDb says also, that the director said he wanted there to be sex in the movie, but rape is not sex, and so
it wasn't the director; it was the producer.
Yeah.
Terence Fisher
so I don't
did not
understand if you wanted it to
scene.
be, if you wanted there to be sex, then why not have, you know, her and her boyfriend have sex?
Yeah, man.
The funny thing about that is they wanted it for the American audiences, and then yet it got cut. It got cut by the American censors, and in fact, the version I saw of this when I was a kid did not have that scene in it. You know,
Did
I
they
only
not
saw
realize
it
what
when
America, like cutting people's heads off galore? But whoa, sexy time, we're not going to do that. That is a production company that does not understand.
It's not like it's sexy. It's assault. You know,
I'm just saying sex in general. Like if you have a producer who's like, you know what, America needs more sex. That person has never watched.
What is it that they think
hasn't
about?
watched American movies.
I'm sort of insulted that a British film producer of the time thought Americans wanted to see rape. You know, like.
I don't know why you'd be insulted by that. I've watched an awful lot of exploitation movies.
Yeah, there was
I have to tell you that in the 60s and 70s, there's an awful lot of rape scenes in there for no reason whatsoever.
I guess that's fair. But like it feels out of place. It feels out of place in a Hammer movie, which
but that's
are
not
by
even
and
what
large.
I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at is he said it's America. What Americans dig is more sex in their movies, which is not true.
Not
as
true.
far as the way things go. I mean, it's still prevalent today. Like, I took my kid to see the super violent movie, but I covered their eyes when the sexy parts happened. What?
Yes.
Anyway, but not only he did that, but then he was like, well, it is America, so I guess we could have this really attractive couple like do something sexy. Nah, you know what? How about rape instead? So 2 strikes. And you know what? The rape part, I'm going to give it like 3 strikes.
Do you know what would have been really good?
Ugh.
If Peter Cushing had been both sadistic and evil and had seduced Anna, that would have been an interesting scene.
Like, if he, like, that would have been interesting. I'm a mad
Well,
genius.
It certainly would have been in keeping with his character from the other movies.
No, that's what I'm saying. So if he had if he's like, hey, I'm going to blackmail him, but then I'm going to steal his wife.
Yeah.
Even better if he had made it like Frankenstein, so he wanted her for an experiment. Also, and again, sorry, I'm getting into the movie that maybe I wanted to see. Any of those things would have been more interesting than a rape scene and then just kind of the weird blackmail plot.
Well, and also the characters don't remember the rape scene because it was inserted in after the fact, and so therefore all the characters seem to have amnesia about it.
Nothing ever comes of it at all.
Except it does put all of her times where you see her upset in this sort of weird context that she's not talking
she didn't have enough reason to be upset already that all these murders are taking place.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree, but the shadow of the rape scene falls over all of that, and it gives it this sort of weird, real-world weirdness that I for some reason the blackmail and the other, and the dealing drugs and all that other stuff aren't quite. because in the real world there are a lot of women who get raped and then don't talk about it and that are forced to be around the rapist.
True
Just
enough.
like what happens in this movie, and that's unfortunate. And it's the sort of thing when I watch a Frankenstein movie, and I guess this is what Tony's kind of getting at. I don't necessarily want to see that,
Yeah.
like whereas, I don't know, the blackmail stuff and all that other stuff. I just think that's cool supervillain stuff. Like
Sure.
the it's weird where your standards are because, like, yeah, I'm okay with him like cutting off heads and blackmailing people and all this other stuff because it just shows what an evil genius he is. Whereas, you throw in the rape and that's a little too grungy. And I wish
I
I could
agree.
find the version I saw on videotape which didn't have the scene in it. Like I
Yeah,
really do.
I think you would be forgiven for just removing the scene in your head and thinking that it doesn't exist, because it makes the text entirely too difficult to discuss for what is
Well, and I think
essentially.
maybe
Yeah.
they should do a Terence Fisher cut. If they ever release this movie, they should just do the Terence Fisher cut because
Yeah.
he didn't want the scene in and just cut the scene out.
Yeah. Yeah, but Joy is right. It mars the film. It makes it. It maybe takes it off a full letter grade if we were in the business of letter grades. Because that's a big one. I mean, it's offensive, and also it has no effect on the story unless you use too much of your imagination, and then it gets worse. I mean, yeah. And as Tony said, there's like 3, 4 different great ways that we could have gone, having thought about it for literally 15 seconds. So that sucks. But yeah, uh, I'm trying to think what else we should discuss here. Oh
I
well,
want to point out that I feel like this movie has a different this is the first movie out of the Hammer Frankenstein that we've watched that looks fully like the Hammerscape. It looks fully. It has a much more Victorian look to it.
well, that's
You have
right.
guys in bowlers and guys in top hats, and it has like the style of the clothing on the characters has changed slightly from the
It
previous
is
two
full
movies
on
that we've watched.
Victorian. That's absolutely right. Yeah, when we first saw Frankenstein, he was enmeshed in Regency period, with his double flies and all that stuff. And here he is a Victorian dandy, and in London no less. Um,
Yeah, I'd love to hear a costume expert talk about these films and how the time of each of the films is actually, whether it's anachronistic or what, as far as what it's supposed to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. That would be worth studying.
So you said you wanted to. What else should we talk about? I actually want to talk a little bit about the again with the darkness of this whole film. What happens to if we're going to call him the monster, to the doctor, or whatever, Dr. Brandt?
Yes.
With his wife won't accept him because he's in a new body. She's freaked out by it. So he decides. Well, I mean, he decides basically that he needs to die. Frankenstein needs to die. Frankenstein must be destroyed. So that is the title, and it is what ends up happening. Is he's the one who decides Frankenstein must be destroyed, and so he's going to send his wife away and set her house on fire, and then walk into the fire with Frankenstein and burn the two of them down. And that is some dark shit, man. I mean, that is when you decided that your life is so crappy and awful, and everything that's happened is so crappy and awful, that you're going to burn yourself to death in order to make sure that this person dies, which of course probably, given that there are additional films, he won't. That's dark.
Well, also, I mean, it's one of those things too where you get the impression at first he thought maybe he could patch it up with his wife, like if he just enough chance. But once Frankenstein like beats him and everything, and he feels like he might die again or go crazy again because of those, 'cause Frankenstein, like, just when he thinks he might, have bested Frankenstein, Frankenstein gets the better of him.
Yeah.
And that's at the point where he really is like, I'm committed to doing this. Like, this is where it ends. Because even his plot to basically burn Frankenstein. I mean, I kind of got the impression originally he thought, well, if I can burn Frankenstein, inside this. Maybe I could get back with my wife. Once he realizes that can't happen, that's when he's like, all right, this ends here. And that's great stuff. I mean, and
Yeah,
it's so point like all the stuff with the doctor and then and his wife, that's great.
sure.
It's such great bits.
Well, and the concept of Frankenstein himself being dragged into the fire, screaming by his
that's so
monster.
good.
This is a mirror of what happened in Bride of Frankenstein, because remember, the monster says, we belong dead, but the monster let Dr. Frankenstein go in that movie. In this one, he's like, we belong dead, and that includes you, you sadistic, crazy person.
You must be destroyed.
Well, Colin
Frank-
Clive was rather more likable than Peter Cushing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wish that Peter Cushing's character were more likable than this. I like him better in Revenge, where he's still a sadist, but the thing is, you forget that he's a sadist from scene to scene until he just pops up and does something nuts. That is a more compelling character than here, where he.
Well, but I mean, he's. I think at this point he's older and less prone to fooling around. Like I think that this character has progressed to this point. Like he doesn't have the need for the social niceties that he once had.
Which is saying a lot
again,
for Baron Frankenstein. Yeah.
Well, I think I like the Colin Clive Dr. Frankenstein. I like this version as well. I think if I were to write a version of Baron Frankenstein, I probably would draw more upon this one, because I think that's. I don't know. Actually, the Dr. Frankenstein on Penny Dreadful is kind of a in between being the arrogant Peter Cushing and the sort of more sympathetic Colin Clive version. So if you want your in between, there's a version out there for you, Jason.
I should point out that Thorley Walters plays the police detective who's in charge of who's following Frankenstein around, basically. And I find it interesting that the movie takes the time to present a smart police doctor and a completely moronic police detective. He's practically the comic relief of the film, and I don't understand what's going on here. I'm not sure. None of that works for me. It feels like just a distraction. I'm not particularly interested in Thorley Walters doing his stammering business and and all that stuff and being a fool. He's a fool. People are constantly correcting him and he doesn't get the correction. So he's the character's a joke. It takes up a huge amount of screen time. I have no idea what's going on with this guy. People are going to write in now and go, you are denigrating the memory of a great man, Thorley Walters, and I'm sure that's the case. But yeah.
I mean, I feel like that those sort of side characters are what makes Hammer horror to a degree. Like they have an awful lot of these.
Oh yeah. Well, it is a variation on the character he plays as the burgomaster in Vampire Circus, but I enjoyed that performance a lot more. I enjoyed the character a lot more. Thorley Walters is doing what he's going to do with this character, but I don't think the whole business of making the police look like morons lands a kilter for me, because I'm not invested in the notion of whether the police in Victorian London are really smart or a bunch of morons. So it doesn't do anything for me as an audience member. I just see this Frankenstein who's super smart up against a truly moronic police detective.
So you would rather see Baron Frankenstein up against the smart detectives?
Absolutely, yeah. He needs to be up against
Baron Frankenstein versus Sherlock Holmes, which would be hard for Hammer, because
yes,
they would
awesome.
both be Peter Cushing.
They would both be Peter Cushing.
That would be
That'd be
awesome.
awesome. A one-man show, just Peter Cushing.
We could throw in Van Helsing for
Wouldn't that
a
be
battle
awesome?
of the Peter Cushing
And Count
super
Dooku.
geniuses.
I mean,
if
no,
by
I
some
think that-
ridiculous coincidence Baron Frankenstein and Sherlock Holmes had the same face and had to sort of hunt one another, um, you know, that's a very clever idea. That's a wonderful idea.
Sherlock Holmes just using his smarts to be a Frankenstein. Ooh, how
Yeah.
about Sherlock Holmes bringing back Watson in the same way? Oh, but I guess according to this, he would have to put Watson's brain in Moriarty's body.
Well, he could put him in Thorley Walter's body, and then
No, it's
you'd have Thorley.
Grand Moff Tarkin. That's who he played. Yeah, I was thinking, how can he?
Count
Grand Moff-
Dooku was Christopher Lee, so there was still the hammer.
Yeah. No, well, that's
Hammer.
the thing is, I just finished reading that Veronica Carlson was in a movie with Christopher Lee, who was Count Dooku, and then Grand Moff Tarkin, and then what's his name? Oh God, what's his name? That's in the body of Darth Vader. Not.
Oh, David Prowse.
Yeah. Oh, there's a really good
Yeah.
documentary on him, by the
Frankenstein's
way.
monster in Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell.
Yep.
He
Oh,
also
man,
played the
plot
monster in
twist.
horror.
Plot twist:
Horror
he has to put
Frankenstein.
Watson's body in the Hound of Baskervilles.
Tony was still back in the Frankenstein Sherlock Holmes fan fiction that we were writing.
Yeah, well, slash soon to be awesome movie.
Yeah. Good lord.
But
By the
we
way,
started our Castle of Horror production company.
Oh man,
I should note. First of all, by the way, that is something that we've been talking about doing a comic book anthology. We could do any number of just variations on Hammer films and make tiny changes to them to protect the copyright of Hammer. But I should mention, yes, Peter Cushing did play Sherlock Holmes in Hammer Studios' production of The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Also directed by Terence Fisher.
Also directed by Terence Fisher, and he played Sherlock Holmes for several series on the BBC. So
no, see, all that's awesome. But
Yeah.
again, think how much more awesome if the Hound had Watson's brain.
Yeah.
No, I
no,
don't know.
for sure.
Sorry.
Oh God. Or Thorley Walter's brain once again.
Oh yeah, all of that. Ooh,
yeah.
if the Hound was Moriarty, let's double down.
I do like the
I don't
idea of a sadistic megalomaniac puppy dog who's out to like take everything over. That's a clever idea. If Moriarty woke up in the
If
if
they
more
can do,
think about
if
this
they
for a
can
second.
do a Sherlock
Like that
Holmes
Benji movie.
Hellraiser mashup, then surely this is something.
I
If
would
Victor
also
Von
watch-
Doom,
What's the Benji movie where he's Chevy Chase in his in
Well, that's the
Oh,
Shaggy
man,
Dog.
Yeah.
that's the Shaggy Dog, or is it the Shaggy
No.
DA?
No,
One of
no,
those.
no. That's
No.
totally different. There's a Benji
No.
movie. Or
Oh,
was it
Heavenly Dog.
or,
I can-
is there a Heavenly Dog? Maybe.
Oh yeah. Oh, Heavenly Dog. So
Yeah.
I would
Yeah,
also watch
it's,
a movie where we found out Moriarty.
Yeah, Heavenly Dog. That's the same idea, except now you're talking about Moriarty
An
being
evil.
like
No, I would
Joe.
also watch a movie where Moriarty ends up that he was Frankenstein in disguise, and Sherlock Holmes has to foil
Oh, that's a
his
fabulous
plot
idea.
to make a ton of, monsters.
Why haven't there been
Or
more
replace. Oh
Frankenstein?
man, what if if his plot was to replace Parliament with monsters?
It's a great idea.
I don't know.
But the thing of it is, Tony, you laugh, but that is not so ridiculous. I mean, that does sound like at least one Alan Moore plot. And
Sure.
you could probably do that one tomorrow. In fact, what's shocking to me is that hasn't been done more. There have been 500 million Sherlock Holmes and Dracula stories, but there haven't been a lot of Sherlock Holmes and Frankenstein, and I think that's something that's sorely missing. Anyway, this appears to be the end of Frankenstein because he's being dragged into the fire, and the audience would have been forgiven for thinking that because indeed it is the end of this series. Because again, like I said, this is for
I love
this
how
is-
they linger on
Yeah.
the burning house throughout the credits.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so that's the end, and after this one, they reboot completely with a movie that nobody likes, and so then Peter Cushing actually comes back for yet another film a couple years later, which I think is a fine film, by the way. I really like Frankenstein Monster from Hell, but this this is a capper for this series, at least for now. So we should go ahead and get our final thoughts on Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, which we've been pretty rough on, but I have to say is critically regarded as one of the strongest, if not the strongest, in the entire series. So reflect on that. Give us your opening thoughts. Which way did we do it? I think we went Drew, Julia, Tony, and then me. So Drew, best of the series. Where do you land on this one?
I think it's pretty good. I think I still think Curse was the best. I mean, you know, and I maybe that's a cop out answer because it's the first one, but I think Curse is the best the whole way through. This has a lot going for it. It's not my favorite. I do like it a lot. I'm glad that we did this one. I'm glad that we doubled down on doing some Frankenstein movies. I think that this is a big hole in our we haven't really discussed Frankenstein at length. We've had Frankenstein in the Van Helsing movie. We had Frankenstein in Monster Squad. We haven't really touched. We did Young Frankenstein. We haven't really touched down on proper Frankenstein films. So I think that I'm glad that we did this whole retrospective. I'm glad that we did both Universal and Hammer, and I hope we can come back to this topic at one point because there's a lot of interesting Frankenstein movies out there, and I would like to do more Universal, more Hammer, and also get into some of the off-brand Frankenstein films that are out there because there's some interesting ones out that aren't part of these well-known series that are also worth exploring.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Drew, I'm sorry, Julia, Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed. What say you?
I think this movie must be destroyed. No, I'm kidding. I didn't. Yeah, I mean, I said already. I didn't care for it, and I think it's kind of sad. I'm just sad about it. I'm sad that it is the way it is, and I don't know. I think maybe partly too is my mood has not been the greatest the last few weeks for obvious reasons. And so I think probably I gave it a harder, maybe I was harder on it than I would have been if I'd been like, all is well in the world.
Maybe it's just hard to watch a movie about a supervillain and we have a supervillain about to be president.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
There you go.
That's all.
Tony?
Yeah, like I said, I still think I'm firmly in the middle. I kind of wish there'd been more monster, perhaps, and less people monster, or at least more evil genius pushing towards monstrous things. All in all, other than straight up chopping heads off, he's less mad genius and more criminal, like straight up criminal. And it's got a lot of great bits, and when it's truly terrifying, the part with the hand, his body, Peter Cushing chewing up scenery, he's amazing, of course. All the parts with the wife and the doctor, fantastic. But pardon me, that doesn't make up for kind of the rest of it, where I was kind of marking time a lot of times. And it does have all of the hallmarks of great Hammer, the blood, the costumes, all of it together makes for something interesting. Perhaps I just wanted more interesting, and perhaps that's on me. Again, I don't think it's fair to review a thing like, I wish it had been this. But a lot of it, as much didn't work for me as did work for me.
I think it's totally fair, Tony, for you to observe something about Hammer films that is often the case. That, to me, I am in love with these films, and yet rarely, with a few exceptions, do I find any of them to be solid A-plus films. I mean, I really liked Revenge of Frankenstein, for instance. But in a way, Hammer to me is a shadow of some true Hammer film that exists in the world of forums and involves all of this great color and all of these great bits and all of these interesting performances, and all of those would be gathered together in some sort of perfect plot. It never quite happens, with a few instances that are really great. I think Brides of Dracula is rock solid perfect. I think Curse of Frankenstein is about perfect. There's a few others that are just fabulous. I love the whole Carmilla vampire cycle. Those are some really enjoyable films. But generally speaking, you see a Hammer film and it's so exciting and you go into this world, but there's always problems with it. And it's just strange. I mean, what you're left with as you think back on them is you go, well, that bit was cool and that bit was cool, stretched across 2 decades of film, which is a lot of enjoyment for something to bring you. But you're right that taken each one for all in all, there's always something missing. It's an interesting tragedy of these films. So no, you're totally not wrong. It is a great frustration of the shadow of Hammer that we see. I have nothing else. Let's get to our endorsements then. So, Drew, did we start with you? I believe so.
Yeah. Well, about 6 months to a year back, I gave kind of a half-hearted endorsement of the first season of the Scream TV series, which cropped up on Netflix. Now they've added the second season, and I've made my way through it, and I have to say it is much improved. It's a better slasher movie than the first movie, if you can say that about a TV series. It's got more atmosphere. It's got better kills. It's kind of since you are now not having to you've moved past thinking of it as a reflection of the films. Like it's just an easier time taking it. It's sort of a really, really, really long slasher movie, and I found myself more thoroughly enjoying it than I did the first season movie. I don't know where I was getting that. So, I gave the first one a kind of a half-hearted endorsement. I'm giving this one a more enthusiastic endorsement. If you're a genre person, this is particularly somebody who's looking for a decent slasher-related thing, this is a good way to pass a few hours, and it's just fine, disposable entertainment, and easily found on Netflix.
Excellent. Julia, do you have anything to endorse this week?
Oh gosh, I really enjoyed Arrival. It was a very fun movie. I like what I call mindfuck movies. I like movies where you're just like, whoa, that is not, and in this case, it's like the whole notion of how we see space and time and aliens and all that. It's just really interesting. So I really got a kick out of it. I liked it a lot. I thought Amy Adams did a great job. Jeremy Renner is great. So I recommend it. I know it's not for everyone. One of my friends posted that she loved it, and somebody else was like, I thought it was horrible. So I don't know. So maybe it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I thought it was really great.
I tell people, if you like the pacing of Interstellar, even if you didn't like Interstellar, like the pacing, to me it was Interstellar. It's super smart meets Day the Earth Stood Still, and if you like both of those, I think you can't lose with Arrival. I'm going to second you that Arrival is really great.
It's a really great way to put that. That is wonderful. Tony, is there anything else that you'd like to endorse?
Yeah, just a couple things actually. You can watch the documentary about Brian De Palma called De Palma on Amazon Prime. You can also order it on Blu-ray, evidently. It's really great. It made me want to go back and rewatch a bunch of De Palma films. It also made me go, wait, that's the thing I haven't seen. I need to see that.
Yeah.
It's really interesting watching a director, just throwing out like, oh, and then Bobby did this. Bobby being Robert De Niro, and Steven,
Right.
had a phone in his car, and here's some, video. That's Steven Spielberg. Like this group of people making these films, and like how that all was. Like it's really, I thought it was really cool. I'm also going to, and this is not everybody's cup of tea, but I met this director, saw this crazy imagery, and then there's some crazy imagery. This is why I kind of have to have some caveats, but director of who's crowdfunding, he did a short called Night Satan and the Beats of Doom, and insane costumes, lots of insane imagery, but he's taking that short and trying to crowdfund the full length film. And I just on the imagery alone and the name Night Satan, I was kind of had to check this out. Ends up the director's really cool. We like horror movies and we like metal, and so that's that's bonding for me. So I'll have to post the Indiegogo and the YouTube link. I mean, I sent it to someone actually though, and I was like, I hadn't fully watched it. Like I kind of, watched it while I was doing other stuff, and he wrote me back and was like, "What did I just see?" Because there's this imagery and that imagery, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess that part's not for everybody." But that's often the case with horror, especially when it's something as crazy as this, satanic synth band. But so I have to make the caveat of obviously, talking to friends of mine, like I don't know what to think about that. But for me, it's a kind of insanity that works. So I'll have to post the Indiegogo link and all of that. Or yeah. So, and the YouTube, you can watch Night Satan on YouTube freely. So
Excellent. My only thing that I would add, I'll second Arrival, but the main thing I wanted to draw attention to about Arrival is that unlike in the trailers, which kind of hid this film takes place. It is like the day the Earth stood still, only in the middle of Montana generally, and but it is a Montana that rarely gets seen on film because it is the grayest, drizzliest Montana ever. It is vast farmland, but it's a perpetual 5 in the afternoon in the middle of November. It is it's so it's so just grim and gray. And I loved it. I really loved just being immersed. You can feel how cold everybody is. It was amazing to see the breadbasket of America presented in this way. I enjoyed it. I thought it was gorgeous, just truly beautiful to look at. Um, so that was neat. Uh, and I got nothing else. So here is the scoop. We are going to be doing two films in a row, both that are kind of one-offs and seasonal. I won't announce yet what they are, but one of them is very, very seasonal because we always do at least one Christmassy show, and then we'll probably have a break for Christmas, and then we'll be back for our long-awaited sexy vampire retrospective, or maybe we're calling it the sexy Euro vampire retrospective. All I can guarantee you is there will be vampires.
Vampire Palooza 2017.
Yes, all I can guarantee you is that it will be 2017, and there will be vampires, and they will be sexy. So that's going to be great.
And hopefully some of them will be male sexy vampires.
I'm
they
sure
better
that we
be.
can dig up some male sexy vampires just for Julia to.
But not Twilight, because Drew will kill us, or at least
I might actually murder you all in your sleep if you try to make me watch Twilight.
I'm telling you, Embrace of the Vampire is the way to go.
he'll send you glitter bombs for sparkliness. That'll be his revenge. Hey, why don't we? That's actually something good. We should have people. We always talk about like, hey, send in your feedback, whatever. Suggest us your male sexy vampire.
Yeah,
we can go on and on. Like, I mean, just going through the gamut of vampires. There's lots of.
And let's put that to Twitter and Facebook as well. I think we can post that. Say like Find Julia a sexy male vampire.
Or
Yeah.
two, or more.
But not
However many,
necessarily
I
like in
think
real
it's-
life.
I think
Right.
it's like something that, if there's three guys on a podcast, like that's probably not something we've all thought about all the time. So,
Yeah.
If it is, then you've been very secretive about it.
Yeah.
hey, I'm secure enough.
Not that there's anything
If
wrong
there's a
with
guy who's
I mean,
like,
I did have that shrine to Antonio Banderas for a while.
well, yeah, as one does.
It doesn't.
Duh. Right. But yeah, I think that's really interesting because let's, in the interest of fairness, like there's gotta be. Dracula's supposed to be sexy in a lot of things, like, but I think that's underrepresented. So let's
Our audience
throw
will let
that
us
to the
know.
audience.
Yeah.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, because we're gonna need at least one that features a pretty sexy male vampire, whatever that means.
Caveat one that we
so-
haven't done already.
Yeah,
I
it has to be.
I think that usually means good hair, good abs. That seems to be kind
Sure.
of the thing I've noticed about ladies.
Hmm.
Sure.
Yep. So Julian Sands, I think people will recommend, but we want to hear what you recommend. So outstanding. Thank you so much, guys. It's been really interesting going over Frankenstein like this, to go back to the source in the way that we have. This has been awesome. Guys listening, thank you so much. Whether you're coming from Bleeding Cool or from iTunes or Stitcher or wherever, leave reviews. It means a lot to us. Leave us your recommendation for sexy vampires, especially sexy male vampires, for Julia's sake, so that she has a movie that she can host on the show.
Pity me, people.
And
Pity
yeah,
people of
and
Podcast Land.
we will see you very soon for our two interesting December episodes. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Good night, John Boy.
Good night.
Good night.